Barbarian leveling guide from 1 to 50. This is going to be about my experience going from 1 to 50. I also feel like I have a unique perspective on this because I was in a call this entire time during that 24-hour grind with multiple other content creators, all grinding different classes in different ways. So I can see how this stacked up versus other classes and how it will change. Focus in on the Barbarian, what I could have done differently, how I would have done this if I were to do this again, and some of the tips and tricks I learned along the way that will hopefully benefit you guys. What I think really helps, my understanding at least, is going to be having a big picture view of what we're trying to accomplish. The reason why it's 1 to 50 is because things are going to change quite a bit when you get to 50, because that's when it unlocks your Paragon board. And being as prepared as you possibly can for level 50, Paragon board unlocks, and being able to push Nightmare Sigils, I think is going to be a really important thing. And all of my decisions for this leveling guide are going to be in regards to this and preparing for this and trying to get you here as fast as possible, which is going to be difficult because we're Barbarian. We eventually scale and be really strong, but in the meantime, we're going to be pretty weak. So I think another important thing to understand is going to be why Barbarians are even weak in the first place. And I think it has to do with how armor and damage scales based on your level. And you'll find that you pay such a heavy melee tax as being a Barbarian or being a Druid. This scaling system really punishes melee, especially early, quite considerably. And what ends up happening is your armor is going to be scaled based on the enemy level. So notice how it explains it here. Reduces physical damage taken from enemies of equal level by 49%. So that's only reducing it by 49% if they are my current level, which is 51. Imagine if they're higher. A lot of times if you just blasted campaign, like I tried to do, I was like 10 levels down, 7 levels down, and it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to do this. But if you can stay on par with the level, you're going to get your full damage reduction. And I found content to be quite trivialized, even as a Barbarian, once I was able to stay on par with the level requirements of that area. So another big question I want to answer is going to be, should you go party, should you go solo? I think without a doubt, it is going to be in a party, especially when you're on a more difficult leveling class, such as Barbarian or Druid. Just a way better experience. You're going to be able to blast through the campaign way easier. It's just significantly better overall. Another benefit too is when you're going to be farming aspects, you can have people split up and do multiple different aspect dungeons at the same time, and you will get credit for them. You don't need to show up for it. For example, if you're doing like this one here, and then someone else is going to this one down here, you guys will both get credit for it at the same time and get renowned, and it's going to be a really good thing for you and one of the major benefits of being in a party together. Now, with that being said, this is going to be from the perspective of soloing this, because I feel like you're only going to feel the pain points that I'm mentioning here if you're solo and where it actually matters. When you're at a party, potentially you can get carried through certain things and be able to cheat out certain things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do as a Barbarian by yourself. Okay, so next let's talk about progression priorities and what we need to do to be able to be prepared for the Nightmare Sigils dungeons later on. And the progression priorities are going to include campaign, and more specifically, beating Act 3. That is going to be absolute number one priority. Reason is because you get this horse here, and it's going to make every other thing that is also a priority much easier to be able to have this horse. So end of Act 3, start of Act 4 is going to be when you get this. From my experience, when I did the campaign as a Barbarian, I was able to just go through. I don't think I had pretty much any deviation I needed to do. I was able to just do the campaign. It was a little difficult. Probably could have been a little easier if I did divert for a little bit, but it's a slippery slope, because when you're doing these other things, you're slowly going through the map and you could be losing experience because you don't have the horse. So that is one of those things that you got to consider if you want to try to be as optimal as possible. And then the next two progression priorities are going to be Altars of Lilith and collecting all those, and then also doing dungeons, at least for the first time, to get the Renowned. And basically this is all coming down to a Renowned farm, but I would say the biggest priority is going to be the Altar of Lilith, because you get small base stats for all characters when you pick one up. Sometimes you get Paragon points, sometimes you get a skill point directly, but for the most part, you're going to be getting just like 2% strength, 2% willpower, stuff like that when you pick them up. But when it gets really good is, notice how you get in the bottom right corner here, you get 10 renown for each one you pick up. When you start to actually get enough renown, you're getting massive power spikes. So you're getting extra skill points. You're getting potion capacity. I can't stress enough how important extra potion capacity is for beating the campaign. It helps so much when you're under leveled, especially as a Barbarian, to be able to have that. And the extra skill points really start to add up. And then notice later, when we fully finish this, you're going to be getting 4 Paragon points on the far right. And that's per each section. And The first thing, I would say Altars of Lilith are worth doing. I know it's incredibly tedious. It took me about 3 hours, but I think that is something worth farming, even though it's definitely rough. You're going to be a lot stronger, and you only have to do this one time. It's per account, so keep that in mind. And then you're going to be getting all of these extra benefits here for doing that. And you're going to be building renown. So eventually, when you start to farm the dungeons and building renown that way, you'll get closer to getting those Paragon points. Then the next is going to be farming more renown, but it's going to be doing all these dungeons. And this is something that I would recommend doing as a group later, but this is really worth doing, especially a couple of these. Like I'll mention here, the altars that there's going to be a few of these that I think are going to help your build quite a bit and worth doing as soon as possible. This is going to be something a little later that you're probably going to want to prioritize the least amount unless you're in a party and there's a couple aspects that people want to pick up to be stronger for their party. So to summarize, the priorities of the campaign, especially Act 3 or finishing Act 3 of campaign, is by far the biggest priority. Get your horse. When you can't progress any further, you're going to look to find Altars of Lilith and aspects for your particular build. So currently I am on a different build, but for leveling, I think by far the best is going to be Rend. And I'll have a link in the description. But the main thing I want to talk about here is going to be the specific ones that I think you should really prioritize, because it's crazy how big of a difference some of these points make. You can go from feeling super weak to very strong if you get the right priority of skill points. And this is going to be your main move, main generator here, obviously. But let me highlight the ones that I think are really impactful. And I think it really starts to get good here. Obviously, the second you can get Call of the Ancients, you need to get it. You go from 0 to hero. This is probably by far the biggest change in what I was able to do for campaign was with Call of the Ancient. Yes, it's on a 50-second cooldown. Yes, there's going to be a lot of situations you're going to be waiting to use this cooldown. And there's a lot of content where I literally just couldn't do it. I would just be sitting there waiting for the 50-second cooldown. I can't stress it enough how important it is to get Call of the Ancients when you possibly can. Like, as soon as possible. The second you get it, big difference there. Next is going to be, doesn't jump out at you, but this is a really big impact on your survivability, which is down here. And Thick Skin, each time you take direct damage, gain 0.4% base life as Fortify. And then here is where it gets really good, is you want to max this out. While you have Fortify for over 50% of your maximum life, you deal 12% increased damage. So that combination here of getting a ton of Fortify and being able to convert that into more damage, I think made a really big difference. And then another thing too that I think is super good is going through this. So you have Pit Fighter, you deal 9% increased damage to close enemies and gain 6% distant damage. You'll see in the description on how I actually allocated this, but the expose vulnerability is a really big deal to be able to apply vulnerable with your core skill. So don't sleep on that. That was a big difference in damage as well. And then this move, Death Blow, is fantastic. You really want to make sure you're taking the other points here to get the extra fury. When you're on bosses, having that extra fury generator is fantastic. And you're going to start to notice that fury generation becomes a struggle once you tap into Unbridled Rage. It is nice. You definitely get the more damage, but you're really going to start keying in on the moves that generate fury, because it's going to be so much harder to be able to activate your Rend, but it is going to do significantly more damage. So your main ones are going to be up here in Rallying Cry. Definitely take this up here where you get the extra 20 fury, and then an additional 20% research generation. And then here in Rend, you want to make sure you're getting that Furious Rend off. So you get, when you're hitting multiple enemies, you're doing a ton of damage, but you're getting that extra 20 fury there. And then also what I was saying here with the 20 fury there. So you're able to constantly keep proccing it to where you can just keep spamming Rend as much as possible, because you want it at that full fury. And we'll talk about certain legendaries where you actually want to make sure you're at the full rage amount before you actually start using that move. Okay, so next there's going to be a couple key aspects that I think are really worth investing into. Putting them on something that you won't upgrade often, like a ring or an amulet. And so let's break down which ones I am talking about, because for the most part, when it comes to your damage, you're going to be changing out your weapons quite a bit. This is going to be the thing that is going to be all your damage is going to be scaling off of. So these are going to be the things that are swapping out often. So putting a legendary on them is not optimal, especially when you're leveling, because you're just going to trade it out for something better than it very quickly. Putting a aspect on a piece of gear is actually quite expensive. So this is something that you want to have that last quite a while. The ones that I really liked that I think helped a ton. First one, aspect of Echoing Fury. Your shout skills generate 2 fury per second while active. I think this is fantastic. You already have 2 shouts, and you're going to be able to get more fury generation there. This one helped me a ton. I like this one a lot. Edge Master's Aspect, I think, is also fantastic. Skills deal up to 10% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit when you are at full primary resource. I think this is a really good one because you're just gaining the benefit of going to full fury and then dumping that off to get more damage increase. So I like this one a ton. I think it's worth it. And then later on, Aspect of Dire Whirlwind is going to be very good, but for this build, you're not going to need this for quite a while. And then another one to not sleep on is a defensive one that I thought was pretty fantastic is Aspect of Disobedience, where you gain 0.25% increased armor for 4 seconds when dealing any form of damage, stacking up to 25%. So I think this one's really good, worth considering. I would say the other ones are more impactful, but I do like having the extra defense.